to account for money. The man whom he had entrusted $5,000 brought him $10,000. His master praised him for his good work. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, he told them. So now I will give you much more responsibilities. Being the joyous task I have assigned to you. Next, the man who received $2,000 with the report. Sir, you gave me $2,000 to use, and I have doubled it. Good work, the master said. You are a good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with this small amount, so now I shall give you much more. May you be blessed by this reading.
Thank you very much for that reading. You might have seen in your bulletin that the title of the sermon is How to Have Fame with God. Fame's kind of an odd word to use in relation to that, isn't it? But have you ever daydreamed about fame? Ever daydreamed, even when you were much younger maybe, or even today, about what it would be like to be famous? What are the benefits of being famous? What are the potential downfalls? Some of those too, right, of being famous. And what does it take to become famous? Well, I take a magazine, it's called World. It's a Christian-based news magazine. And at the end of every year, they go through pages and pages of little mini articles, just a paragraph or so with a picture of a lot of people, famous people that have died in the last year. So I don't hear about a lot of these, but at the end of the year, I get my World magazine out, and it's probably 100 people or so in here, I didn't count them, that they tell about had died this last year. Let's see how many we can know. I won't go over all of them. Just picked a few. Tommy Lasorda. Anybody ever heard of Tommy Lasorda? Yes. Okay, yeah. So he was famous, right? He's been around a long time. He's a famous LA Dodgers baseball manager, played on teams back when he was younger. So Tommy Lasorda, he's famous. What about Stephen Lungu? Everybody hear of Stephen Lungu? He's in the list. I'd never heard of him. He's an evangelist in Malawi. And these aren't Christian people per se, but he gets in there. He had a reputation as a Billy Graham of Africa. Didn't know. He was famous in Africa, but not so much maybe here. Hank Aaron, anybody hear of Hank Aaron? Another baseball player? Yeah, 23 years in the majors, long time. How about Hal Holbrook? I like Hal Holbrook. Y'all heard of Hal Holbrook? Actor. He portrayed Mark Twain on stage for 60 years. Played the one-man show of Mark Twain. Plus he did other movies and stuff mixed in there. Let's see who else died. There's a lot here. Leslie Robertson. How about Leslie Robinson? No, probably not. So here's what makes him famous. He's a structural engineer who designed the World Trade Center towers and lived to see terrorists destroy them in 2001. So, Leslie Robertson. How about Rush Limbaugh? Anybody hear of Rush Limbaugh? Yeah, who hadn't heard of Rush Limbaugh? Different opinions of what he did, but famous. That man was famous. How about Alexandra Doba? D-O-B-A, Alexandra Doba. Now here's something I can relate to him doing it, but not me doing it. Polish adventurer who kayaked 3 times across the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, I kayaked across the lake at my sister's house, and I can see the other shore easy. And he took off across the Atlantic Ocean 3 times, did the third crossing when he was 70. He died on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Apparently he hadn't given up adventures and even later in life. John Baker. Anybody hear of a John Baker? Me neither. Co-founder of Celebrate Recovery, a Christian 12-step program. He was a recovering alcoholic. He proposed the idea to Rick Warren. Anybody ever heard of Rick Warren? Pastor out in California. So he came to Rick and said, how about we try something like this? And now they've got 30,000 churches where they have Celebrate Recovery programs. You see some signs in Longview occasionally. There's a church out on the Loop that has it. Let's see a couple more here. Alan McDonald. How about Alan McDonald? Here's another one that you might not want to be known for, but I guess in a good way. He did the right thing. He's an engineer with the company responsible for the Space Shuttle Challenger's booster rockets. Remember Challenger? He refused to approve the January 1986 launch out of concern that freezing temperatures had weakened the ship's O-rings. NASA ignored the warnings and Challenger exploded, killing everyone on board. So Alan McDonald had to kind of live with that. Not that, he warned them, but still, something you designed that did that. Prince Philip, wife of Queen Elizabeth, he died this year. Any racing fans here that ever heard of Bobby Unser? I've heard of Bobby Unser, but I don't watch cars go around in circles very often. People do that. Interesting, this is Bobby Unser Sr. died. In the same year, Bobby Jr. died last year. And who's the other one? Bobby Unser Jr. Al Unser, his brother, also died, all in the same year. Interesting. Famous people. Who else? Let's see. Maybe that's all I got. Yeah, there's plenty more, but that gives you an idea. Some famous people. These people did things to be famous. You can be an actress, you can be an athlete, you can be an author, an inventor, a member of royalty, a rock band, a billionaire. Lots of things make people famous. But a lot of that fame fades over time, doesn't it? I'm reading about them today, but 10 years from now, who's going to know some of those names, or maybe almost any of those names a few years from now? But they are famous, and you and I are not famous. Or are we famous? You might think of that video that we just played a little while ago. Are you and I famous? May not be famous with the public, but what would it be like if we could be famous with the most important admirer in the whole universe? What if God himself thought that you were famous to him? What if he knew all about you? What if he admired you for who you are? Back in the book of Malachi, at the very end of the Old Testament, we see here some of the heart of God. And in verse 16, we're closing out the Old Testament, and then there's going to be like 400 years before Jesus comes. But even here, as we close the Old Testament in Malachi 3:16, he says, "Then those who feared the Lord talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. And a scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name." Even in the Old Covenant times, God was aware and cared, and in some metaphorical fashion, has a scroll, a book of remembrance, where he was writing people's names in the book. Does that sound like anything else in the Bible that you hear about later? Maybe in the book of Revelation, where there's another book that people's names are written in? God thinks that we're famous. He knows each and every one of us. In Matthew 10, there's that parable, not the one that we read, we'll come to it later, but there's another parable in Matthew 10, and in verse 29 and 30, find it here. It's not a parable, he's talking to people, yeah. And in verse 29, he says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows." I can kind of laugh about that and go, well, I hope so. I hope I'm worth more than many sparrows. Sparrows aren't worth a lot these days. But just the fact that he knows every sparrow. We've seen flocks of sparrows. Haven't you seen them flying around here? They all just like big giant flocks of them. They turn this way and they turn that way, and then they line up on the power lines, hundreds of them. And to think that God knows every one of those sparrows all over the world, every other animal, creature. But he knows you even more than he knows any sparrow. We're special to God. John 3:16 is a verse we quote a lot of times. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And sometimes the word for world is cosmos. God so loved the cosmos. Well, the cosmos is big. That's everything. God loves everything, everybody. And sometimes we just read that, we think, well, good, I'm glad he loves the cosmos. But what does he think about me and you? Well, the fact that he loves the cosmos and everything in the cosmos and everyone in the cosmos. It's not impersonal because he knew us, as other verses tell us, and we'll see later. He knew us before we were born. He formed us, formed you in your mother's womb. The Bible says he is familiar with all of your ways. We are made in his image. It says in Genesis 1:26-27. We are, in that sense, image bearers of the very nature of God. And each one of us is individually known and loved and, I dare say, admired by God. You are his child, individually special. You're famous to God. Hard to imagine, isn't it? But there's a negative part about being famous sometimes, and that has to do with the vanity. Some people that are famous know they're famous in the wrong way. And they have this vain attitude about it. Well, I've done this or I've done that, and therefore I'm famous and you're not, and I'm better than you. And when we say we're famous to God, we don't want it to be that kind of fame, where we, as it says in the video, no comparisons. We don't want to be comparing ourselves with other people going, yeah, but I'm better than that, I'm smarter than that, or I'm stronger than that, or I'm more wise than that person. It's not a matter of us comparing ourselves with each other, or even comparing ourselves with ourselves, because as the video reminded us, all our gifts, all our talents come from God, and we're just reflecting back what he's given to us. It's not something that we created in ourselves and came up with. So we don't want the fame to drown out proper humility, on the other hand. But is it wrong to desire fame with God? Got me thinking about this. I like C.S. Lewis. Any of you ever read any C.S. Lewis books or essays or articles? He's a pretty famous British writer. Was an atheist and was converted. Well, he was a Christian, then he became an atheist, and he was converted back to Christianity years ago. And he wrote hundreds of articles and so forth. He wrote a sermon, and I say he wrote a sermon because back then they wrote their sermons in the Church of England and so forth, where he went. And when he would give a sermon, it would be written, and therefore they could publish it, also. No one's asked to publish any of my sermons yet, but that's okay. So this was a sermon he gave in 1941, so it goes back a ways. And it was called The Weight of Glory. And I've read this a couple of 3 times over the years. And it's one of his better known ones. It's kind of heavy in places, but it's very enlightening because the man thinks. He really thinks. And he talks about, on into the sermon a ways, about the idea of glory. That's why it's called the weight of glory. And the weight of that is referring to the idea that we have this glory with God. We have this fame. And it's our responsibility to not let it go to our head, but to appreciate it and to give honor to it as God does. And so in this, let me read you just a couple of things, and let's see. The first one, I think if you go to the next screen, there should be some verbiage. Look at that, it's magic. This is a quote out of the book. I thought maybe you could read it quietly there while I read it to you. And he's talking about the idea of fame. He says, when I began to look into this matter, I was shocked to find such different Christians as Milton, Johnson, and Thomas Aquinas taking heavenly glory, quite frankly, in the sense of fame or good report, but not fame conferred by our fellow creatures. Fame with God, approval, or I might say, appreciation by God. And I think there's one more page. And then, when I had thought it over, I saw that this view was scriptural. Nothing can eliminate from the parable, and this is the one that Miss Wander read for us, nothing can eliminate from the parable the divine accolade, and in the King James and other versions, it's worded, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Well done. To God, we're famous. And when he gives us an accolade, well done, that's what we're after. That's what we ultimately want in life. We want God to tell us, well done, thy good and faithful servant. We want to be, in that sense, famous in God's eyes. He goes on, and I don't have these, I have other words, so I'll have you flip that in just a minute, but not yet, Sammy. On in the same sermon, he talks about how it's not conferred from our fellow creatures, but it comes from God. And that kind of fame is similar as a child desires to please its parent. Any of you who have had children, have been around children, you know that especially when they're young, and really at any age, right? We're all still children in that way. Don't children like to hear their parent or some other adult say, you did real good with that? Excellent. I'm so proud of you. You get a check mark for that, a gold star, something like that. And that's the kind of fame that we get from God. He looks at us and he's like, I'm proud of you. I love you. Just like a parent, because he is our parent. It's like a pupil before his teacher, Lewis says. It's like a creature before its creator, that is in front of its creator. We are small in that sense compared to our God, our creator, but he looks at each of us individually. We mean something to him. We're not just part of the cosmos, and that's it. It's not a self-admiration. It's not admiration of other creatures for our goodness that we manufacture from within ourselves. But it's a fame that comes from our desire to please God, to reflect the very godness that he places inside of us at our creation. We don't do it perfectly, do we? Ever do it perfectly. But as we mature as Christians and grow, I think there's more and more of that shines out, hopefully in our life. Our intention, our discipline, our direction is to be the best example of God's nature in ourselves and to reflect that to others. That's the kind of fame we want in our lives. There's true humility involved with that. And there's a godliness and a confidence that comes along with it. Not a cocky confidence, not one that says I'm better than I really am, but one that says God's working with me. God is making me into something. I am his child. I am his creation. I am made in his image. He loves me. He's working with me every day. And even when I stumble and fall, he picks me up and we move ahead together. He's interested in my life. Our trust is in the Lord. And he's the one who's faithful. He's the one who's all powerful. And he's the one that's sharing his life with each of us. So as in the parable, God provides us with everything. As in the parable that Wanda read from, we didn't go back and read the whole parable, but God was handing out the talents, the funds, the money in this case. But we might even look at it as talents as we use the word today. And when he saw people that had used them and made good use of them, he said, well done, good and faithful servant. They loved hearing those words. God, we may bake the cake, as it were, an analogy, but God gives each of us the ingredients. All the raw ingredients are from him. And so as we go through our life and our journey and we grow and we build and we make mistakes and we learn and we move forward and we bless other people with various small to maybe sometimes larger ways in our life, we keep the focus of that sort of fame. It really is a thankfulness to the goodness of God that he shares with us. I might go ahead and let's see if we'll read the next quote, Sammy. Should be a couple pages. And he goes on to say here, a little later in the sermon, and that is enough to raise our thoughts to what may happen when the redeemed soul, that's us, that's you, beyond all hope and nearly beyond belief, learns at last that she has pleased him whom she was created to please. There will be no room for vanity then. She will be free from the miserable illusion that it is her doing. And then, with no taint of what we should now call self-approval, she will most innocently rejoice in the thing that God has made her to be. And then I like this sentence. It was a little later in the paragraph. If God is satisfied with the work must be satisfied with itself. And I say that because as Christians, we're oftentimes taught to not be vain, to not be famous, to not have those kind of desires, to be well known. But God says it's okay. Not that you have to be famous like these people reading about in the magazine, but to be famous in that we follow God, that we have a reputation, that people say, that person's always happy. That person helped me a lot with the few words that they said at one point. That person is always bringing me gifts of food or clothing or seeing me when I'm in need, and on, all the things that we do that make us famous. It's okay. We don't have to minimize that. We don't have to push those things aside and say, that's not me. I couldn't do something. But you are. God gives each of us those gifts, and we use them in his glory and to honor him. And so people, when they thank you, when they bless you, just think that they're blessing God in you. That's passing through us, going to the person. And they're really giving thanks to God, and we turn around and give thanks to God as well. You know, God created you. He knows you. He loves you. He's on your side. He is for you, not against you. He judges each of us using his, and I think I coined this term, his curve of grace. Like in school, remember when you'd get your paper back and you would hope sometimes it was graded on the curve because you knew you didn't do very well, but you're hoping everybody else didn't do very well either, and the teacher would go, well, maybe that was a hard test, maybe. So let's kind of curve that. Let's add an extra 20 points to everybody or something. Let's kind of, and you're like, whew, thank goodness. And that's what life is like sometimes. God judges us, I think, on the curve. And sometimes we can be harsher on ourselves than he is on us. Sure, he wants us to grow. Sure, he wants us to admit sinfulness and when we fall short. But he's willing to pick us up and just move right ahead with us and help us to continue to grow. There will be a final day when God confers eternity upon us. But he is intimately involved in your life and my life right now also, today and every day. And even now, God tells us, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. There's a video I'd like us to watch now. I'm keeping Sammy busy today. Got to earn his keep. And I played this before. I'm not senile. I remember I played this before. It's called The Father's Love Letter. And I want to play it again because every time I play this and listen to the words of it, it reminds me of just the God that we serve and how much he loves us and how much he intimately knows about us. And we can lose that. We can lose that knowledge just as the weeks go by. And sometimes we need to be, I think, reminded. And so let's watch and listen to, scripturally speaking, God's heart of love for each of us to remind us that we are his and we are famous in God's eyes. And what a wonderful news that is. And then after this, we'll have our final song.
words you are about to experience are true. They will change your life if you let them. For they come from the very heart of God. He loves you, and He is the Father you have been looking for all your life. This is His love letter to you. My child, you may not know me, but I know everything about you. I know when you sit down and when you rise up. I'm familiar with all your ways. Even the very hairs on your head are numbered. For you were made in my image. In me you live and move and have your being. For you are my offspring. I knew you even before you were conceived. I chose you when I planned creation. You were not a mistake. For all your days are written in my book. I determined the exact time of your birth and where you would live. You are fearfully, wonderfully made. I knit you together in your mother's womb and brought you forth on the day you were born. I have been misrepresented by those who don't know me. I am not distant and angry, but am the complete expression of love. And it is my desire to lavish my love on you, simply because you are my child and I am your father. I offer you more than your earthly father ever could, for I am the perfect father. Every good gift that you receive comes from my hand, for I am your provider and I meet all your needs. My plan for your future has always been filled with hope, because I love you with an everlasting love. My thoughts toward you are countless as the sand on the seashore, and I rejoice over you with singing. I will never stop doing good to you. For you are my treasured possession. I desire to establish you with all my heart and all my soul, and I want to show you great and marvelous things. If you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. Delight in me, and I will give you the desires of your heart. For it is I who gave you those desires. I am able to do more for you than you could possibly imagine. For I am your greatest encourager. I am also a father who comforts you in all your troubles. When you are brokenhearted, I am close to you. As a shepherd carries a lamb, I have carried you close to my heart. One day, I will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and I'll take away all the pain you have suffered on this earth. I am your Father, and I love you even as I love my Son Jesus. For in Jesus my love for you is revealed. He is the exact representation of my being. He came to demonstrate that I am for you, not against you, and to tell you that I am not counting your sins. Jesus died so that you and I could be reconciled. His death was the ultimate expression of my love for you. I gave up everything I loved that I might gain your love. If you receive the gift of my Son Jesus, you receive me, and nothing will ever separate you from my love again. Come home and I'll throw the biggest party heaven has ever seen. I've always been Father, and will always be Father. My question is, will you be my child? I am waiting for you. your dad.